So I'm Michael Newey, and in this context I'm the chair of Norwich Theatre, where I've been for the last almost 9 years. Day job is I'm chief executive of Broadland Housing Association, so my day job is very intrinsically involved with housing and homelessness, and then I have an array of non-executive roles, and I'm a past president of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors as well. The theatre approached me. I just finished being president of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which was a global role. The RICS has 120,000 members spread across the world, and I was very keen to start doing something back in Norwich, something where I could bring my skills, which were about governance, strategy, running a business, into the sort of community sphere in Norwich. So when I was approached by the trustees back in late 2014 and said would I be willing to join the board, and this was what the brief was, it seemed to be a perfect match. And actually there's something also really quite wonderful. I wasn't involved in the arts beforehand, so it was very much a two-way experience. I was offering my skills, my experience to Norwich Theatre, but I was getting a huge amount back in terms of what I was learning about arts and culture. So what am I going to miss? I think what you miss most when you leave any organisation is people, whether it's a full-time job, a non-exec job, a voluntary job. And there's some tremendous people that I've worked with over the last 8.5 years at Norwich Theatre. There's a huge commitment from the staff team, which I think is really impressive. And I think probably it's a lot of time it's behind the scenes and people don't see that. The trustees I've been working with, I will still be able to buy tickets and come and see shows at the theatre. So it's not as if my whole arts and cultural experience will end in March of 2024. But yeah, it's going to be the people, because that's just been a real privilege to work with them. So the lows as chair would have been being chair when we had the fire in the kitchen, but the silver lining of that, of course, was Prelude opening. And there was a pandemic, and there is nothing more depressing if you're chair of a theatre charity than having nothing on the main stages. So the highs would be firstly modernising the governance. I was very much brought in by the other trustees to modernise governance and arrive at a better structured board and a sort of powerful working executive team. Seeing the executive team working with the board to deliver the new strategy, building stage 2, opening Prelude, completing the merger with Playhouse. I mean, it's been a very busy 8.5 years so far. I'm going to refuse to answer the question specifically about what the best show is that I've seen, because actually there's been such diversity, and trying to compare a ballet with a musical, with a drama, or whatever it might, a podcast, for example. I think for me, the most memorable show would probably be A Costa Danza in 2018. Memorable for two reasons. The first one was that if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be going to see modern dance, I would question your sanity, because that was something that wasn't on my agenda. And that's actually a really good example of how being involved has stretched my own cultural boundaries. And the second reason I would say Carlos Acosta's Costa Danza was because I was speechless at the end. And that's I was sitting next to Jane Claridge, who was a director at the theatre at the time, and she said it was the first time she'd ever seen me speechless. But, best shows, I can't think how many times I've seen Les Miserables now, but I've seen it twice as chair. The penultimate time that I saw it was the night before we went into first lockdown. So the last show on the Saturday night when we ended up closing on the Monday. And then coming back in 2022 when we reopened and we had it back on the main stage. So that with those three performances of Costa Danza and the two performances of Les Miserables, I would say were the best things I've seen. What do I hope my lasting legacy will be? That's a really difficult question, because actually as a chair, just like trustees, you should be invisible. People shouldn't know about you. Lasting legacy, I think the introduction of better governance. Sounds really boring, governance. It's board meetings, it's executive teams, it's a relationship between the two, it's working out the strategy. So the fact that we've got a really ambitious strategy is where we're going forward. We're passing that on to the next generation of trustees and execs. There's no doubt that we've got better front of house facilities. It's better experience for our visiting patrons. And there's something for me about the sense of ambition. I said a moment ago about strategy. The big transition over the last 8.5 years is that we're now both a producing and an originating establishment. And so, Land of Might Have Been, for example, is something that we did jointly with Buxton, or the Jake Humphries podcast taking Carlos Acosta around the place. I think the legacy for me is not an individual legacy, it's one I share with others, including the exec team, is being more ambitious and being more willing to commit to taking risks in order to make a real difference. What advice I'll give to the next chair? First one is listen. Seek to understand before you come to conclusions, because I think there's a real risk when any non-exec joins. They brought with them a load of experience and they're generously donating. Well, is it the right experience? So actually find out what's going on. We've got a really great team here. So there's something about really listening, getting to know, getting to understand where we are, what we're doing, the context in which we're doing it. Play the team game. So don't see yourself as an individual, see yourself as part of a team with the trustees and with Stephen and the other executive directors. There's a responsibility to ensure that the board carries out its role. So there's also something for the board and trustees to realise that they're not, this sounds wrong, they're not the friends of, they're actually there to do a job, which is, yes, it's developing strategy and agreeing strategy with the executive team, it's monitoring, it's scrutinising, it's challenging, and it's also supporting. And if you just do one of those, or even two of those without the others, you won't be a very good chair. But it's about getting the team to work as the most important thing, I think. I think my proudest moment was probably the opening of Interlude in Chapelfield Gardens in 2020. So it was nothing to do with our buildings, because actually our buildings were closed due to the pandemic, and proving that we could take something out, working with a whole array of artists who otherwise wouldn't have been able to perform in a safe environment, which meant our audiences were able to come and enjoy the arts at a very bleak time of life for us all. Actually, I think the proudest moment has to be how this theatre kept going through the pandemic and came out the other side. A good trustee, in my estimation, the first one is they have to fully agree with the enduring purpose of the organisation. When you join a board as a trustee, you're not there to reinvent the organisation, you're there to ensure that the organisation can deliver its purpose in a compliant way and still be ambitious. So the first one is really buy into and believe in the enduring purpose, because if it's outside your own value set, you'll be useless as a trustee. Secondly, it's to understand that you're not there to do anything operationally. You're there to, certainly in an organisation as big as Norwich Theatre, no trustee should be crossing that line between non-executive and executive, or non-executive and operational. So know your own boundaries. Know as a trustee sitting on a board, you've got collective responsibility, and therefore you've got collective authority. So as an individual trustee, especially if you're not the chair who would have a direct relationship with the chief executive, you are there as a decision maker, as a group. And that doesn't mean that you as a trustee can wander into the organisation at a later date and start giving operational instructions. That's not your role. So it's something about buying into, knowing the purpose and agreeing with it, buying into the values and understanding the boundaries of your own role, and then taking very seriously the fact you are responsible in law for good governance and for viability. Don't get overscared by it. Certainly in an organisation like Norwich Theatre, where we've got a really competent team, but take it seriously. It's not there. You're not there for the friends of. You're there to take out a proper, authentic role. Over the last 8.5 years, I've worked with an amazing group of people, and that amazing group of people are trustees, they're volunteers, they're members of the staff, they're directors. And actually, if anybody is involved in any organisation, that's the greatest privilege, isn't it? You can only achieve what you want to achieve if you're working with great people. You can be amazing in yourself, or you can think yourself amazing, but actually, without the rest of the team, you're absolutely nobody. So it's something about the people I've worked with over 8.5 years. I said earlier, what I'm going to most miss is the people. And I think that just keeps coming back to me. You can have bricks and mortar, you can have stages, you can have all sorts of things, but it's the people that make it work.